So I'm here with Amie Dean, and she's a psychotherapist and also an author, and she's coming out with a new book which we are going to talk about slowly. But she's here today with us because we did a past life and a life between life session today for the second time, and the first time we had the session was when she is case number 2 in When Souls Transition. There she is, Amelia, and she remembers her past life as Alice, and then went from there into the life between life. That is 4 years ago now.
Yeah, 4 years.
What can you tell me about your experience and how you've been processing this?
Yes, thank you. So first, I'm just so glad that I found you. We'll start with that. It just was a life-changing experience. I truly didn't know what to expect at the beginning. It was very much, I was open and excited and ready, but didn't know what was going to happen. And by the end of it, I had so much clarity. I did need to take some time to process it. I'm sure as a lot of people do, because there's so much information, and it's just, it's almost like feeling like, for me anyway, coming home to myself. And so afterwards discovered, through being the experience in Alice in that past life, there was an understanding that I was meant to be a writer in this one. That was one of the big takeaways that I uncovered, and it was really profound, really profound.
In Alice's life, can you describe what happened during her life?
Yes, absolutely. So in Alice's life, she went through quite a journey. I had an experience where she was traveling for some of that life in Europe. It was in the 1800s.
Was she American? Or?
She was not American. She was European. Yeah, she was European, and I'm always struggling to find right? Because I feel a connection to Alice, but it also feels like I know it's a past life, so it doesn't feel so like my identity now, for instance. Right. But she struggled a lot with getting her independence, and especially as it related to her parents at the time. She was an only child, and in a wealthy family who needed her to marry for, basically status in life to continue the family line. And she did not want that. She wanted to have independence, have freedom, enjoy her life, and not feel bogged down. And so she ended up, unfortunately, in a marriage that was not right for her and was really difficult. And it was just because they weren't soulmates, they weren't connected in any way. And, toward the end of her life, it ended up being a situation where she was deeply unhappy. She wanted to be a writer. She couldn't be a writer. She lost the love of her life during her travels and did not ever find another love after that. So it was kind of a heartbreaking story, actually, as I tapped into it, but it was really eye-opening at the same time. And by the end of it, realized that there was a deep depression around this. And so in that life, Alice ended her life and then decided to, continue onward, and discovered that she was actually held in love the whole time by benevolent spirit guides through that experience.
She realized that after she passed away.
After she passed, it was really incredible to go through that death experience. At first, a little, of course, anxiety producing, because you're tapping into something that's, feels brand new, even though you're reliving it. And then from there, it was just so interesting, because I just felt like I was moving into a new state of being, if that makes sense. Like I was becoming one with myself again after the ending of the life of Alice.
Just to explain to the listener, we started out obviously with a past life regression.
Yes.
And then we had to transition through the death of Alice. And then you went into the life between life, where this life and the learnings were processed. So what did you discover at that time during the life between life?
Yeah, so during the life between lives, it was such an interesting discovery. It was at first feeling like, am I going to be reprimanded for ending my life, first of all? Am I going to be, am I going to feel terrible about this? Is there going to be punishment of some sort? But it was all love. I just remember feeling embraced by these beautiful light beings, and just being encompassed in love, and feeling so understood, and so it's almost like feeling like I wasn't alone after feeling so lonely for so long. And that was incredible. And then, of course, there was advice and wisdom that came after the love burst, I'll say. And then from there, it was understanding more why I had chosen that life, and that it was a life that was difficult on purpose, because I was trying to basically move through this time of getting to know who I really am. right? Like the self-identity experience of who am I, and how do I move through a time where, you know, women, female writers were not really looked at as being, you know, important at the time, and or, you know, at all in some ways. And so for me, it was just like trying to be who I wanted to be was constantly pushed out almost, right? And had to face that. I had to face that in this life to see that I did not, you know, wasn't going to get the freedom that I wanted in the way I wanted it. And then I had to go up against those odds. But it was a choice that I made, that my soul made in order to grow.
And why did you have to go through this frustration as a woman?
Yeah.
What was it, the 17th, 18th century? Or what was it?
Yeah, exactly. It was around that time frame. I can't remember the exact date. I think it might be in the book, but I'm not sure. But you know, from my understanding, it was a choice because I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to challenge myself to...
I remember the guy telling you, are you sure you want to take on that challenge, right? Because it was a very impossible task in those days as a woman to stand out, to have that kind of independence.
And
though you had the money, you couldn't...
Yes, I had to use my parents' money, and they kept some of it from me because they're like, you're not going to keep traveling, you're coming back, you're marrying, you're settling down. And it was very vivid experience. And I just remember, you know, feeling so trapped. And you're right, and the spirit guides had said to me, you know, this is going to be a tough one. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And at the time of deciding this life, you know, with my spirit guides' help, I was really motivated. And I thought, I can do it. I can do anything. You know, I've had many, many lives before this. I got this, you know, no big deal. And it felt so empowered, but not realizing coming into a disempowered time does mean that you're going to have a lot of issues, right? So I think it was all kind of conceptual and not lived experience, of course. So I had to live it. And so no regrets in that, right?
But what did you learn from the fact that you willingly chose an impossible situation that indeed you could not execute according to your desires? What was the lesson in not being able to fulfill it?
That's a great question, actually. I don't know that I've ever sat with that. So maybe the lesson was not being able to fulfill it in this life now, because maybe they're all connected, right? Maybe the lives are all connected in some way. Because as I look back, I recognize now as Amie, in this life, I can look out and say, okay, what do I really want to do with this life? What's important to me? And writing and expressing that and being the expressive channel, we'll say, in this life is one of the most important things for me as Amie. And so maybe, you know, it wasn't something I could have learned through that life. Right? I almost feel like I learned it between lives and then had to wait until this life to really explore it further.
So could you say that it was the beginnings of an emancipation and awareness, but unfortunately though the time wouldn't allow it, but it imprinted in you the strong you know, awareness that this is who I am, this is what I need to do. Exactly.
I think without that life, if I look at it this way, the lesson now is without that life, I wouldn't have faced such hardship, you know, and now it almost seems easy in comparison to write my book, to get the book out there, even though there's still challenges involved in that. But it feels like there's an ease, there's a flow. Now my creativity can really be channeled properly, essentially, and utilized. But now there's an appreciation, even a gratitude for the fact that I've already been through such a difficult experience.
So you're aware in your day-to-day life about Alice and her struggles?
You know, it's interesting. I wouldn't say day to day, but I was aware after, so this was 4 years ago, right, after our session together, and I was feeling really inspired to write my book that had been kind of swimming around in my head, and finally got to it. Right after, it was not long after our session, the pandemic had hit, and then I went on the road with my husband, we started traveling, and the idea started flowing. I thought, I gotta get this going. And I was thinking about that past life experience and Alice and how she was so stuck and so trapped, and it was the total opposite of what I was living in that moment. I felt so free, and we were on the road, and me and my husband were living the life of our dreams, and I was writing, and nobody could stop me. And it was just, it was a beautiful reflection to see that, you know, I was where I needed to be, and I learned that this is what I needed to thrive, right, in this way. And I think there's other lessons there too, just around rebelling and other things, and finding freedom even when you can't find freedom too in certain situations in that life, because there was a lot of like entrapments there. But in this life, there's a lot of like learning to let go when I feel trapped, right? Learning to let go when I feel stuck. Things that I don't think Alice could have done. I don't know that
she ended it prematurely.
She ended her life prematurely, and I don't feel, and there wasn't any like animosity or even any regret from that, because everyone she loved was gone. You know, she didn't really feel like there was anything to live for. So I really feel there was no regret or any kind of karma kind of mixed up in that. But it just felt like I could just let go. But I could see now in this life, like, can I just be with what is, right? When I'm stuck, when I feel like I'm not free, like when things, because life happens, right? And things get in the way and you have setbacks and all those things. Can I just notice that and not go into that really negative state of mind, which I do feel in some ways is from that life, when that mindset has come up in the past.
Giving up and escaping.
Just giving up, yeah, I've noticed that, like the Alice mindset almost, right? It's almost like I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore, right?
It made you aware that don't repeat this pattern.
I'm not gonna, exactly. And then whenever like despair would come, you know, in this life now, I would remember that time
I mean,
with
just
Alice.
think of the power of the knowledge of reincarnation. In this case, not only are you familiar with the concept of it, but you actually remember what you did before. And thereby not repeat it. Instead, you conquered and fulfilled something.
Yes, exactly. That's what it feels like. It's interesting as I take tidbits of that life and you know, bring it into this life now. I find that I am able to learn a lot from it. Like I feel like I'm growing as a soul as I look back on that and say, okay, well, clearly those odds were stacked up against Alice, right? And now I can say, well, there's going to be odds stacked up against Amie in this life too, right? In different ways. But am I going to prevail? Am I going to be persistent? And I feel that. I feel like there's, like what I've gained from it is like maybe this is the lesson too, but a strength, like a resiliency in this life that feels like even when, you know, there is despair, even when it's like you hit rock bottom. For me, you know, in this life of Amie, I feel like I've been able to get back up again much easier. And I think that's because of this recognition that the pathway out is in, and that's been my journey.
Beautiful.
Go inward.
Now, it's a bit early to process today's experience because we just had the session, but it was like, what, 4 hours of past life and life between life. So today we went back to your life as a Native American woman, which was absolutely, I must say, I'm still emotional from it, an amazing experience, particularly her death. I mean, and, you know, then of course we went again to the life between life, and then we started comparing current state 4 years later from what we did before, and then plus Alice's life, plus this American. So we had now several lives to work with. What was your, can you tell the listener for the experience of the Native American woman? What happened?
Yeah, in a nutshell. So, and I'm processing it as I'm sharing it too. It's like, it felt like that life was about community and belonging and having like a tribe of people that you can count on. And it was so full of gratitude and love and abundance, you know, in the form of joy and in connection. And as I look back on that life, it just felt like I even feel my heart's warming up now just thinking about it. It was just such a warm life. And as you mentioned too, the death even was, I was so awake as this woman, so aware, so just present in every way. And it just felt like, well, that's what I've been trying to get back to in this life. And it makes sense now. I think that's something that makes sense. Every time I notice that, you know, something happens or life takes me seemingly off course, I try to bring myself back to presence again, bring myself back to grounding. And I think what I've been trying to get back to unknowingly is that life of living in nature, living in a tribe. And I've actually, you know, we hadn't talked about it yet, but at some point in my life in the past 10 years thought about how cool would it be to live in a commune or something like that with a whole bunch of people where we're all helping and connecting and doing things together. well, now I know where that comes from, you know?
Right.
I didn't know. It was just a random thought and what felt like random desire, right, to have this experience. And now it's like, it's all piecing together in my mind, the desires and the wants and the need for community, and why it's so important to me in this life to build community with others as well, and to help people have that, because I had it. And it was one of the most beautiful things. I feel kind of teary-eyed thinking about it, but it's just so beautiful to have everyone together, like how different it feels now in this life as Amie, being independent and being the traveler, and a little bit more like the Alice life, like being on my own a little bit, but having like a deep desire to create that community and connection with
What's
others.
interesting, today you're a psychotherapist.
Yes.
In that life you were a healer, which is not very different. You were doing spirit healing as well as the physical healing, right? So
exactly.
you had definitely the foundations of what you're doing today, and you're seeking in your place in Washington to create more of that, you know, commune type, so to speak, right? So all of it kind of comes together, right? You're an author through which you then draw people to you, community, and you're helping create an environment for healing and well-being for everybody involved.
Exactly.
So could we say that these two lives, they converge into Amie's be able to put it all together, right?
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think it all connects, it all converges. It's all like a big web, I feel like, of connection in this life, and going toward Washington and moving back there, because I've, you know, have been living there off and on for the past few years. It was interesting because when I got there, it wasn't seeking community. It was just seeking this property to build a retreat center, so eventually we could build community. And then finding community there is what happened. And I think that was always what my soul was guiding me toward at this phase of my life, and for my husband as well. And it was interesting that it all came back to this life, right? And for Alice, it was loneliness. For this last, you know, Native American life, it was a sense of community and having that. So it's like now it's like I'm bringing it all together, right? Moving out of that sense of independence and being alone into being with others in a deeper way. So it feels really big. Really
you
big.
mentioned the beautiful death of, well, I mentioned it,
yes,
but you know,
that
was very emotional during the session, and
so
I myself had to hold back here. You know, can you share just a few words about the death scene of that life?
Oh yeah, it was incredibly vivid. I would say one of the most vivid pieces of that experience was the death. When so I had a son in that life, and he was by my bedside, and I'm laying on this bed. I have this blanket over my feet, and there's a community of the tribe outside the tent, and he's on my left, my son, and he's just kind of like holding my hands and just gently being there with me, and I'm telling him it's my time, and it's just like a knowingness of it. It's an acceptance. It's a true peace around it. There's no resistance. There is some illness, but it's not all-encompassing. It's like I remember looking down and looking at my body in that bed, and I almost see the illness. I'm pretty frail, but I don't feel the illness because my mind is so clear that I'm just ready for this next step, and ready and knowing that my body isn't who I am. It was like a known experience in that moment. And then as I start to pass away, it's like it just suddenly everything goes quiet, and like the voices outside of the tent start to quiet, and it's almost like a muffled sound until just pure quietness, and then just drifting away. And I remember my head moving to the side like this, and looking over and seeing like a teacup, just a cup of tea on the side of the bed. It was like a ceremonial tea that we had participated in to celebrate the death, because that was what the tribe had believed. You know, we celebrate our death, and it's not a sad thing, it's a beautiful thing. So it was a way different experience than what I'm used to here in this life as Amie. And when I saw that, it's just, that's the last thing I see, kind of turning away from my son as I'm dying, which now that I'm thinking about it is very fascinating. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but did pass away, and it was so peaceful and so quiet and so easy. It just felt easy. It was just natural. Like it was like falling asleep at night.
And then we saw you ascending.
Yes.
And then you were looking back at your own body and you saw your son and his state of mind.
Yes.
And what it did to everybody.
Yes. And my heart was just like, you know, of course, really sad for him and seeing that. But it was interesting. It was both. It was acceptance of the death and then sadness for him and the tribe and, you know, but feeling like knowing that he was going to be okay. It was like there wasn't any attachment, in other words, to the life.
Right.
It felt like this was the right thing. And, you know, he felt my presence, my spirit, and because naturally the spiritual community we had created, right, and the belief in such things was easy to share with everybody. And then it seemed, I just said goodbye to the tribe and saw them all together, just kind of in this meditative state, right, sending me off. And maybe that was part of it too, is having that support. Having that love of the tribe everywhere around me might have been a big piece of that now that I'm reflecting on the death. Might have been feeling like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not in a hospital bed somewhere.
Right.
You know, it's like a beautiful, like nature's outside the tent. You know, everything's just perfect as it is.
Makes you wonder whether we as a society have gone forward or backward.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking that. I'm like, ooh, I don't know. Maybe that's why there's so much fear and, you know.
And the need for that community and that spiritual retreat idea that we are seeking the communion that we had in our past lives. I mean, who lived in the modern world like we live today? I mean, in the past we never lived this way.
No.
We were always living in tribes and in more harmonious group settings. Families were together and we were never that alone, right?
No.
Today you die alone and there's nobody there.
Exactly, which probably adds a lot of fear, I imagine, to many people. It's like in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to be put in hospice or something away from my family, or I'm going to be put away, right? And so I think that's a lot of the fear I do for people, because when you have community, when you have love, right, and family, whatever that looks like around you, I do feel just from this experience, it's like, wow, like it is actually it can be a beautiful experience to die.
And it really depends much. What's amazing about your case, seeing last experience, the life between life, and this one, that your awareness of what we came to do as a soul. I mean, because then we went after her death, we went again to the life between life, and you had some profound experiences with guides and even with the source, right?
Oh, so that was big.
That was very hugely amazing. So, what can you tell us about that, and also even the notion that there is such a thing as source, as an infinity, so to speak, that you're part of?
Right.
How does that alter your awareness of your purpose today and why we're here?
Yes. Oh gosh, it was tremendous experience. And as I'm reflecting on the first piece you mentioned on Alice's death versus this Native American woman's death, it was, oh my gosh, total contrast, right? In so many ways. One was, in despair and hopelessness and in extreme pain, and the other was extreme peace. And seeing that contrast, it actually shows me, in some ways, how much power we have in our mind too. Maybe as it comes to the end of life, perhaps, or just in general, right, about ourselves and our experience. But as far as that kind of source experience went, I felt that I was journeying toward source energy as a beautiful sun. But it wasn't like a blinding sun. It was like an orange kind of glow, almost, is one way I might put it. It's so hard to describe. But then as I go forward into it, I merge with it and become one with it.
That's huge. Yeah.
And it's so huge. And it's just like, but it's so funny because now that how do I describe it? In it, it felt so natural. It felt so natural. Like if we would have said, wow, that's amazing, I would have felt, well, this is home. Yes, it's beautiful, but it's just home, right? Like it doesn't feel like fireworks. It's just, I'm here, right? I'm home. But now I'm like, wow, that's amazing, looking back now that I'm awake as Amie, looking back at this experience, because we don't feel that way in our everyday lives.
Or asleep as Amie.
Or asleep as Amie, who knows, exactly.
What's real, right?
In the dream, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so true. But it was so fascinating to see and to experience that, because in it just felt like, okay, I'm home, and now I can take this beautiful light of the divine, of God, of source with me into my next incarnation or my next journey or whatever that might be going forward. And I remember you asking me questions about that too. It's like, well, you know, why not stay here? Why not stay in this beautiful space?
Yeah.
And just like 100% knowing that, like, in my soul's map and within my body, my destiny was to keep going, right? To take that source energy with me, but that I still had work to do on the planet.
Right.
Still had work to do here on Earth.
And you're not totally free until that work, that map has been
exactly
traveled to the
yes
largest extent. So
right, exactly. It's like there's no, it almost like it's a sense of unrest, right? Like you're in this beautiful, you're like in this completeness, but your soul's not yet complete because you haven't yet fulfilled, at least in my case, haven't yet fulfilled what it is I wanted to fulfill, which is helping, you know, to awaken to who I really am, you know, through the journey of being human, and helping others awaken to who they really are through the journey of being human. And I feel like that's a forever journey, so I don't know how long it'll take to get back to source permanently. But it's really interesting to consider, right? How, like, that energy, I can take that and pull that into everyday life now.
And then
too.
it changes your identity as Amie today, right? You,
Oh,
you
yeah.
realize I'm not just
Oh,
some
yeah.
some regular person. I am
No.
part of the
Yeah.
reality that is so infinite, and we all are.
Yes, exactly. That's the perfect word, is infinite. It feels more infinite now. And I did feel that with after the Alice experience too, because I do remember being with spirits and being in light, and just beautiful experience with that journey as well. This one felt even more, maybe even, I wouldn't say even deeper. I don't know the best word for it, but it felt like I went into source more directly maybe this time than I did last time. And maybe that's just where I am right now in the life of Amie, you know, and the readiness to go there. I'm not sure, but now I can take that understanding in everyday life, right? And I can remember, okay, I am acting as Amie. It's like, you know, when an actor gets on a stage and they're playing the role of that person, right? It's like living that way would be really, I think, profound actually, right? Because then it's like, I'm not my identity. I can live as Amie and I can function as Amie, but I don't have to have an identity as Amie.
Well, this is absolutely amazing, right? I mean, that is living the enlightened life, right? And
that's
then
it, yeah.
to take that into our service. And talking about service,
Yes,
we started out
right.
by sharing that you are an author, and which we have now seen through your lives, that you have been able to manifest that in this life.
Yes.
And the idea of service to others through your work as an author. What can you tell me about your book that is about to come out? What is the title?
Yes.
Where we'll be able to get it? And what is it about?
Thank you for asking. So the title is called Unmask Your Soul, the Sacred Awakening Journey to Heal Core Wounds. So it's essentially about the awakened life and going through different phases, and a lot of it felt channeled, quite honestly. When I was writing it after our original past life regression session, so much information came through, so much wisdom, and when I'm writing it, there were things I wrote that I didn't know conceptually. So it was like I was learning as I was writing and growing through this. And one of those was the 5 phases of spiritual awakening, and how as spiritual beings we go through these different, basically these different channels, you know, of awakening throughout our lifetime, right? And we're not always in one, and we're just kind of visiting them, and they're not our identity or who we are, but we're constantly growing and changing through these phases. And some of them is the dream sleep of being kind of on autopilot in everyday life, which is a lot of our collective consciousness sometimes. But then there's also this sense of, you know, growing and changing into discovery of I am not who I think I am, right? So this actually, I feel, helped catapult me.
First stage of awakening, you could say?
Yeah, exactly. It's the first
Out
stage
of
of
the
awakening.
collective unconscious.
Exactly.
Right.
And that it's not a linear journey, although it's kind of shown or shared as a linear journey, but it's not quite linear. It's, you know, because there's like the nightmare phase where we go through this understanding of, you know, extreme despair in our lives, right? The dark night of the soul, for a lot of us, go through that. But it's one of the most important times of our lives, because it's how we understand how resilient we really are and who we are beyond the challenges that we face. And then as we move up through the layers of spiritual awakening, we learn, you know, that we become like co-creator with the universe, which is still separate from, so we're still learning and growing, that we are feeling separate but not quite not quite there yet. We're not quite moving toward the awakened state of being until we start waking up in phase 4. And then we're moving out into the world and seeing, what if maybe I'm not quite who I think I am? Maybe something's out there. And then life becomes more vibrant. You become more compassionate, right? You feel more like you want to give, and there's this sense of connection, right, with others. And moving into the awakened living phase, which I wouldn't say is like the ultimate phase. I'm sure there's phases even beyond what I've discovered. But that phase is uncovering, the sense of who you really are, right? Living the awakened life, which is really what the book's all about, is how to live an awakened life by uncovering these subpersonalities which act as you, right? Whether it's a perfectionist, whether it's a manager part that's managing your life every day and is really controlling, whether it's a part...
All these masks.
All these masks, exactly. All the masks that show up every day and you don't even realize you're wearing them, and you're like, why am I suffocating in here? Well, because you've got too many masks on, and we got to take those masks off. And then underneath those masks is your true self, your higher self, who you really are. And it sounds to some people maybe like, oh, well, that's a nice ideal, right? But really, it's always there. It's just simply taking off a mask. We're already in here, right? We're already our true selves. We just have to remember, right? It's a journey, an adventure of remembering, essentially, is what it comes down to.
And where we'll be able to get this book?
Yes, so this book, one other quick piece about it is accessing your Akashic records for this deep core wound healing, of course. And where you can get it is a great question, because I do not know yet. It's going to be online for sure. I know it will be
Amazon,
Kindle.
of course.
On Amazon, of course, yes.
Right.
But I will absolutely share those details once they come out. The book cover is in the final completion stages, so we're moving toward the marketing and publication stage, but we're not quite there yet.
So I'm going to put it under here. What is the title again? Tell me again.
It's Unmask Your Soul.
Unmask Your Soul.
Yep, the sacred awakening journey to heal core wounds.
Okay, beautiful. So you got that? So buy her book. It's going to be very helpful.
Yes, thank you.
And that's what we need. We need good tools. We need good food, right? To liberate ourselves and awaken ourselves.
Yes, exactly. And there's so many ways to go on these journeys, right? Like with you, it's a beautiful experience to do this from a hypnotic perspective, right? And then the journey I take readers on is to do this from a meditative perspective, kind of similar, by accessing the Akashic records and experiencing the love and the divine that's within each person. So it's a beautiful journey. It really
Absolutely.
is.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey and to be so open to share this, because obviously we have 30 cases and just logistically to get everybody here to talk about it would be impossible, because people are from all over the country, sometimes the world. And so I could not get anybody here, but at least I have Amie, who came to visit us today and yesterday for this occasion. I'm eternally grateful for you to take the time and the openness.
Absolutely. It really felt like it was soul inspired to be here right now. So I'm really
wonderful.
glad.
We're grateful. Thank you so much.
Me too.
And good luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
All right.
Sounds
Take
great.
care.
Thank you.